Hello and welcome to Module 7 in our series STL2 with C++. In today's session, we're going to write code which will allow our sprite, the rabbit, to fire at enemy rabbits or enemy bunnies if you like. Let's now look at the code we need to write. We will begin by introducing a new sprite, a simple egg that will serve as ammunition. So to get started, in your Windows search bar, type in VIS. You should see Visual Studio 2022 and your project in the list. Click once on your project to open it up. Now I already have mine here, and we'll begin by introducing our new sprite type variable. We will call that egg sprite. We will also need a texture type variable to hold the image data. So we'll have star egg texture. Right, remember this is a pointer to a structure of SDL texture type. Now we need to initialize the memory taken up by this structure or this variable. So let's go to the main function, and here we'll call memset, passing in the address of our new sprite. That's egg sprite. We want the region initialized to 0, and the size of the region is determined by the size of our structure sprite. Okay. Now we need to load the image data. So we'll use our variable we just declared, that is x texture equal to, we'll call the load texture function, passing in the name of the file. Now you will find this file at a link in the description of this video. Make sure to copy that file into your project folder. Once we have the image data in our variable egg texture, we will set egg sprite.texture to the image data stored in egg texture. Now we need to set the origin of this new sprite, the egg sprite. We will base the origin on the origin of our rabbit sprite. The aim is to have the egg positioned so that it is not visible until it is fired. So keeping that in mind, we'll set egg sprite.x, and that will be equal to sprite.x plus, and because it's the x-axis, we will now use the width of the rabbit sprite. So that will be sprite.width divided by 2 will give us the center of the rabbit sprite, and then minus 10 works for my screen so that the egg is not visible, in terms of the width. Now in a similar way, we'll work with the y-axis. So x sprite.y equal to sprite.y plus, and now we'll work with the height of the rabbit sprite. So sprite.height divided by 2 to give us that center, and here I'm putting in a plus 25 because again that works well for my screen. You may have to tweak these numbers to see what works well for your screen. Remember, in the end, the egg should not be visible until it is fired. Okay. Right, so with that, we have introduced our new sprite. Let's look at the next steps in terms of code. Allow the player, that is a rabbit now, to shoot using the egg as ammunition. Important note, the egg needs to move horizontally across to the other end of the screen, which means the egg has to move from left to right, which in turn means that our x coordinate alone changes. The y coordinate should be constant while the egg moves, right? Before we proceed, may I ask that you leave a like on this video, and if you're enjoying the series, then do subscribe to the channel. It not only helps promote the channel, but also keeps me motivated to create more content like this. Thank you. So let's now go back to the project. Now, when we are talking about the egg being used as ammunition, we will require the use of a key that will be pressed in order to fire. So our first change will come in our do key down function. So here you can just copy these 3 lines of code. And we'll now change the scan code. We will use the scan code for the left control key. But what is a scan code? So there's 2 ways of finding out. One is you just type in all caps STL scan code. And then we are looking for the left control key. So you should see it in this list. There it is. So you can just pick it up from there. The other method is to look in our scan code lookup table. So you can just click find on page and type in the same thing. STL scan code. And we're looking for the left control key. And there it is, right? Okay, so now the next change is in the do key up function, right? So here we'll change this to 0, but are we going to use the right arrow key? Of course not. We have a separate key that will be used for firing, and so we'll introduce in our struct.h a new integer. We'll call that int ready to fire. Okay, and that is what we will set here. So instead of write, it will be ready to fire. And similarly in our do key down function. Okay, so now we have set the key. We know we're going to be using the left control key, and we also know that when app.readyToFire is a 1, that's when firing will happen, right? But we need to check for that. We also have to take care of the movement of this egg across the screen, right? So what we'll do is we'll have another function here. Let's call that function fire, and no parameters coming in there. Within this function, the first statement will be if app.readyToFire. Remember, in main, we have set the origin, but that's not within our while loop, right? So just take these 2 lines of code and bring them now to within our fire function. Okay. Right. In addition, for movement across, we will have to set the x coordinate and the y coordinate. So what we'll do is we'll have 2 integers introduced here, one for movement on the x-axis, so let's call that move x, and another for movement on the y-axis, we'll call that move y. And then coming back now to the fire function, we'll set egg.movex to, you can put it as 35 or 32 or 30 if you like. That should be xsprite. And then xsprite dot move y, we'll leave it as 0. Right, what we've done here is we have defined where the egg will land when we press the left control key. But remember, it has to move all the way across, so the origin needs to keep changing. So here we'll say xsprite.x plus equal to xsprite.movex. And then similarly, xsprite.y plus equal to xsprite.moveY. Right? And that completes this fire function. Now we've got to call this function. So coming back to our main function now, we'll call this function within our while loop just here. Okay. We haven't yet taken care of the render copying, if you will, or the drawing of the egg on our screen, right? So we need to call the blit function for that. Now, where do we call the blit function? Do we call the blit function after calling the blit function to draw the rabbit or before? So what we need to understand is that the screen is colored or painted on in layers. So if we call the blit function for drawing the egg after we call the blit function for drawing the rabbit, then the egg will be drawn over the rabbit or on top of the rabbit, which means it will overlap our rabbit sprite. That's not what we want. We want the egg to be kind of behind the rabbit. So we draw the egg first, and this will be egg sprite dot texture, passing in egg sprite dot x and egg sprite dot y. So now let's run this. And there we have our egg. Okay, and you see it's not visible until it is fired, right? What's our next step? We've got to take care of a situation where the egg moves beyond the width of the screen. So if it moves beyond the width of the screen, we need to inactivate it or deactivate it. To do that, come back to your project and we will introduce in our struct.h a new member to this structure, that is our sprite structure. That will be a bool type member. So boolean is active. And now in our main.cpp, come to our fire function. So here we'll put in a new condition. So that will be and. We'll check for whether the bool type variable, that is active, has a value false. So not egg sprite dot is active, right? So if is active is false, then what we'll do is we will set it to true. Okay, and then here we'll put in another if statement. We'll say if egg sprite dot x is greater than our screen width, then we'll set egg sprite dot is active to false. Okay, so there is an error here, and that's because of a missing bracket. So we just put in those missing brackets, right? And that's it. In our main function, we will call the blit function to draw the egg on screen only if is active is true. Okay, so only if it is true, then we call that blit function. So we'll just cut that statement and paste it here. Okay, let's run this now. Right, so you can move your rabbit and fire as well. But you see it's disappearing below, as well as if you take it to the left, it will disappear. So we've got to take care of that. Just after this if statement, we will call a function check rabbit position, and we got to now define that function. So I'm going to put it here. Okay, that's going to be void check rabbit position. Within this function, we'll check first for the x-axis. So if sprite dot x is greater than 1050. Okay, so we're taking care of the rabbit moving beyond the right edge of our screen, if you like. Then we'll bring it back. So sprite.x equal to 1050. Now we'll take care of the left edge of the screen. So if sprite.x less than 80, let's keep it at 80, then sprite.x equal to 80. And similarly now for our y-axis, right? So we take care of the top edge of the screen as well as the bottom. So if sprite.y greater than 600, then we'll have sprite.y equal to 600. And similarly, if sprite.y less than, I'm going to keep it at 80 again, you can play around with these values, sprite.y equal to 80. Okay, now let's run it. So now if I try to move it beyond a certain point, it will not go, right? Because we've set those boundaries. Okay, and of course our firing works, right? That ends our session for today. Till the next session, take care. Bye.